And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Global Citizens. My name is Calvin. I am this show's host, and of course, I am its creator. So we are three more episodes away from my 100th, and the thing is that this is a personal milestone for me. There's a saying that in podcasts that once you reach the 10 episodes, that is already the breaking point, whether you can continue or whether you don't. So I accomplished that. I surpassed that. So I am looking forward to be able to continue advocating for the third culture kids. So my guest for today has actually a very unique encounter of how we met. So what happened was that somebody actually impersonated her Facebook profile. So at that time, I actually know her only through LinkedIn. Then I recalled that, wait a minute, this person this does not seem right. And I actually found the actual person. Then after that, I reported about it. And afterwards, surprisingly, she agreed to actually make an appearance. So I guess that's a good karma for that. So my guest for today is influencer, motivational speaker, health and wellness coach, Miss Jenny Castelino. So Jenny is born in East Africa. She is of Indian heritage, and she is an adult TCK now, who subsequently has settled in the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, and currently my own second home, Singapore. After over 3 decades of working as a seasoned corporate executive, the last of which was as a director for a division of global relocation company, Cartus. Her role as a director was in the intercultural and language training solution that delivered cross-cultural training to expatriates and fort holders, which is my own term for accompanying spouses, as I dislike it, as I have openly said 100 times before that I am an openly mama's boy. So after her 3 decades in the corporate world, she stepped away from the warm familiar globe and set up Tribality, a health and wellness coaching program that combined coaching that looks at both the body, mind, and spirit as an integrated whole to galvanize individuals and businesses to look at health as an invaluable resource for life success. So, without further ado, I'll pass the spotlight back to us. Jenny, how are you?
I'm doing great, Calvin. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm really excited to be talking with you today about all things cultural.
Thank you, thank you. I hope I've done enough justice for your introduction, or am I missing anything?
You made me sound fantastic.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. You are. All right. So, for those of you who just tuned in for the very first time, Global Citizens is an online platform of live stream broadcast interview, like what we are doing now. The main purpose is to represent and advocate third culture kids like Jenny and myself, who grow up outside of our own parents and passport culture country. So along with that, I've also represent the global citizens community of every platform from the digital nomad to even expatriate. The main purpose of this is intercultural studies and awareness because a lot of time people mistook this life as an extended holiday, an extended vacation, which absolutely is too far from the truth. We are living chameleons because we need to learn to adapt who we are, how we talk, what we even believe in order to fit in a certain country. And the thing is that this is just us trying to fit in. But I hope that this is something that people will listen so that people understand that this is too far from the truth. Jenny, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, my apologies. Give me a sec, yeah? I
No
think I'm
worries.
having some camera issue. Okay, yeah, apologies about that.
That's
Uh,
okay. All good.
okay, I'll just edit that out. All right. All right, Jenny. So this will be your very, very first question. So How do you define home? And aside from your loved ones, is it geographically still in the UK, Singapore, or even in the Hong Kong, or even in East Africa? Yeah.
That's a great question, because I think if you're a TCK, one of the things that is fantastic is that everywhere becomes your home. So everywhere that you move to, you take a little piece of you to that location. So for me, the UK still feels like home because I have parents there. My father is 102, my mother's 90. So their house still feels like home because of the memories that I've had from the time that I was 11 years old has always been in this house. But Singapore also feels like my home because I've been here now for over 26 years. So it's kind of interesting for me. When I go to the UK, I tell people here I'm going back home. And then when I'm there and I'm coming back to Singapore, I also say I'm going back home. So I think it's wherever I choose to take my heart, wherever I choose to make memories, wherever it feels like home is kind of inside. So, but definitely memories come into play. And there is definitely a part of me that's very connected to East Africa as well. My elder brother went to East Africa and he sent back to Uganda, and he sent some photographs of the last place that we were living in. And as I looked at the photographs, I just found myself crying, even though I was 11 years old at the time, because again, there were a lot of memories there. And yeah, so I think it's a kit bag. It's you carry your heart with you, and wherever you go, it's much easier if you see that as an adventure and you make that your home.
Well said. Well said. Okay. Sorry, can I just rewind again? You said 26 years in Singapore. You are actually one of the 3 people who has beaten me on the duration of time in Singapore. I was there for 15 years, and I plan to return before the pandemic started, but it's still too far from yours. So,
it's a long time. I thought I was coming here for 2 years, and 2 years became 4, became 8, and then suddenly here I am, and I've just passed my 60th birthday, and I'm still here.
Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right. Okay. So as of now, you are actually considered an entrepreneur as your health coach. Yeah. So I actually want to ask this question for you: health, empathy, or happiness? Which of these 3 is? Well, all of 3 are very important stuff, of course. But the thing is which would you prioritize first?
Okay. For me, I'd have to say health. And the reason that I choose health over the other 2, obviously all 3 are important. But the reason I picked health is because I think it's easier to be happy and to be empathetic when you have your health. So as we all know at this moment in time, when you don't have health, it's really a challenge to be resilient, to show up, to be there for other people. And I have a little bit of an issue with the word happiness because I'm not sure that anybody knows what it is. It's one of these elusive things that we all chase, and we tell our kids, you've got to work your whole life and then you'll end up being happy. It's this place and far in the future. But the question is, what is it? So for some people, it becomes the things you own, right? So I want to have a bigger car. The 5 C's, as they used to be called in Singapore, we equated that with happiness. So if I had my cash and my condo and my credit card, et cetera, et cetera. But those are all things you own. And the question is, has it made people really happy? So I prefer the word joy and the word peace and the word connection. And I think all of those, if we have our physical, emotional, mental health, then we are able to switch into those much more easily.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, yeah. I remember that 5C. Aside from Pachukang's catchphrase from when he first started, that was actually one of the first few things I learned when I first came to Singapore.
That's so funny, yeah. Yeah.
I think the 5C's definition has changed somehow, but
it has changed, but everybody still remembers those 5 C's.
I think it was cash, condo, credit card, What's the other two again? I can't remember. Cat.
Oh, like country club membership. Like a club
Oh,
membership was one, and I can't remember what the other one is. But yeah,
I think one person mentioned cat before, but I don't know if that's the real one. So
yeah. So
okay,
cash, credit card, condo, club membership. Yeah, and I can't remember the fifth.
okay. Well, let's move on, shall we? All right. Yeah. So earlier you mentioned health is of course the priority. Yeah. So that is of course what your coaching practice Tribality is about. So do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about how you came up with Tribality? I mean, for over 3 decades you were in a corporate world, so I think that is takes a certain dedication to it. And after all this time that you have been in one place, you decided, okay, let's try something new. What motivated you to do that?
Yeah. For me, I think like most people, it tends to be your own personal journey. So I have no regrets about my time in corporate. They grew me as an individual. It gave me opportunities to move from the UK to Hong Kong to Singapore, to travel the region, to learn a lot. So I have no regrets about that. But I think when you lose your health, you go in one of two places. Either you think, I just have to accept what's happening to me, and I just take the medication, do what I'm being told, or you start to say, well, hold on, what's actually happening? I don't want somebody to tell me what the name of my condition is. I want to try and work out how to get out of here. And in that process, I've started to first find that was my passion, is to try and unwind what's going on. And then it kind of became an obsession, which is I kept up wanting to know why. So we talk about the fact that even when we talk about the pandemic, everyone is so focused on the fact that we need to wear the masks and we need to socially distance and we need to look at vaccines and we need to wash our hands and all of these sort of things. But for me, there's an underlying question, which is, why has this pandemic hit us so hard? And to me, the answer is because of the state of our health globally. Because if we look at all the pre-existing conditions that they say make somebody more susceptible, then the number of people who had, or the percentage of the population who had those conditions 60 years ago, 70 years ago, was much, much smaller. So I think the question should be, why are these things affecting us? Why have we had more pandemics in the last 20 years than in the previous 100 years? And if we don't address that, then where does that leave us? So I felt like a lot of people, even in developed countries, it didn't really matter. We're caught in a cycle of surviving. And it wasn't just elderly people, it was every generation. We saw suicidality rates and suicide ideation rates going up, even in very young people, including in Singapore. We see that burnout now, there's one study I read, it was over 90% of Singaporeans now feel that they're struggling with burnout. We look at the fact that we're being told in most countries that 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 of us are going to have cancer in our lifetime. So every illness now is just being jacked up. And for me, I wanted to say, well, hold on, let's find out the why. So I consider myself, Calvin, a bit of a wise woman in terms of always like that little kid going, but why? Why is that the case? Why? So don't just tell me this is the fait accompli. Tell me why. What's the journey that we've come on that's brought me to this place? And so hence the name Thrivality as well. I wanted to take people on a journey which gets them from surviving to thriving, regardless of what life is throwing at you. Because I think people are struggling big time. And that is emotional, it is physical, it's psychological, it's spiritual. I think people are really, really struggling. And I think something has to be done about it. But I think Thrivality for me is beyond health coaching. So it's about life coaching. It's about helping people to connect. So I also do presentation skills, communication skills, unconscious bias, which leads into our discussion about culture, because I think that unless we know how to connect as people to ourselves through our health and other ways, and to each other, then I think we are living in a much sadder, darker place. So I think anything that kind of switches on and puts us into a gear where we kind of say, I want to show up for this life. I think you earlier talked about it, that some people think that this life is just a holiday. But if we can show up for life, feeling more connected, feeling more engaged, feeling more passionate, feeling more in control, feeling like we can be empathetic, all of those things. And I think that has to be a huge part of what we do as individuals, as humans.
Okay. That's well said. That's really well said. Do you mind if I think just now you used the term the circle of life here is because people are so in nowadays in developing country and especially in a developed country, people are more focused on surviving the day-to-day needs they need to provide for the family. But in pursuit of that, sometimes you forgot that actually we are connected in a bigger world is because we are connected globally. Now with the access of social media, you get to know what is happening in other parts of the world and you can make your own assumption, or you can do your own research and you come up with your own conclusion in case in aside from just media bias, etc. So how do you feel though people can be more understanding and could be more united in a sense? I used to tell them that there are three things that can connect you, and that is food, stories, and tragedy. And if you have teenage childrens, then yeah, you are a lot more connected. Is because you guys will complain together about how they are not even listening to you anymore.
Yeah.
So what about yourself though? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think social media has some amazing things that it offers, and technology has some incredible gifts that it gives us. Especially during the pandemic, I can't imagine for many people what life would have felt like if they didn't have access to other people or feel connected to the outer world, because I think things like loneliness, a lot of people have really, really struggled with that. And I think when we look at what do we need as human beings, the fundamental things that we need as human beings, one of them is connection. We need that because we are tribal by nature, we're group by nature, we're like primates, we're like monkeys and chimpanzees. We don't do well just by ourselves. And so one of the fantastic things that technology has given us is that ability to be able to see and find out what's going on in the world at large, to connect with our loved ones, regardless of geography, to find information literally at a click. And so those things are incredible. But I think there is also a belief that if I find something on social media, it has to be true. If somebody feeds me information, you commented about the fact that you can do research, but I don't think most people bother to do research for themselves. And so what the social media companies tend to do, without exception, is if they see that you, Calvin, have a belief that is, for example, you believe in climate change being caused by man, and let's say Jenny doesn't believe in climate change is caused by man, then you will only see articles that reinforce your belief. And I will only see articles that reinforce my belief. And so whilst technology should be there to help pull us together, in some ways it does, but I think it can also be very divisive and actually make what seems to be a gap a huge chasm, because you absolutely will believe your story and you surround yourself with information that comes in that endorses your story, and I'm doing the same thing. And so for me, it is about approaching everything. And I think cultural beliefs is about approaching everything you believe in and actually doing some research for yourself. And actually looking at the research that tells you the opposite to what you believe is true. And say, if that was true, where is the actual data behind that? And who paid for that data? And really dig down deep to sort of really start to examine our own beliefs. And so I think even with cultures, you talked about generational gaps. My mother actually, at the age of 90, is on Facebook. Both my parents have access to email. They both are on Zoom. So we've moved them into that direction because we thought it was really important for them to have that, especially during the pandemic. The younger generation, people that are younger than myself, spend a lot of time on technology. And so I'm sort of stuck in the middle there where I can see both sides of it. I want soul-searching conversation where I can sit down in person with you and see the color of your eyes and your body language and everything like that, because I feel like true heart-to-heart connection comes from that. But I also see the value of technology. So I worry about the fact that people feel lost without technology now. So one of the bits of research that I was looking at is that on average, people, because you're quite a bit younger than me, of your age are going to spend over 35 years of your time staring at a screen. So if you imagine that the average age, maybe 75 or 80, so 35 years of that is going to be doing this, right?
And then I am 28 years old now, so I will be 63. Wow.
And so that's full time. And then you've got to add on another 30 odd years of sleep time, 7 years trying to fall asleep, which means potentially your whole life will have been either laying down or sitting down with one of these. And so I guess my fear is, how do you embrace change and grab the good things about it, but how do you also spotlight the potential negative outcomes and say, what are we going to do about this piece? Because unfortunately, what happens is you end up normalizing what is not normal. So people will say, oh, but everybody spends 10 hours, 12 hours on their computer. And so then you start to justify in your head and say, well, so I'm the same as everybody. But it's common, but it doesn't make it normal. So that's a very long-winded thing, which sort of says we need to be able to challenge our beliefs. We need to approach it with curiosity. We need to challenge where our data, our knowledge comes from, challenge ourselves to do that. We need to have conversations that say, you think so differently from me. And rather than me pointing the finger at you and saying, you're wrong, I'm right, is to actually sit down and say, Calvin, talk to me about where you're coming from and why do you believe that? And give me examples of why you believe that, and that you do the same for me as well.
I'm trying to digest all of that in. Wow. Because the data seems quite accurate. Yeah, I do spend quite too much time on my phone, and I produce a podcast, so yeah, I have to be in front of the computer a lot of time, and my usual job is a translator. So wow. Yeah, that is a lot of time on the computer. Okay. Yeah, because in the past, what I do believe is that it's not about the time that you spend online; it's what productivity that you use that time online. But that's.
And I absolutely agree with what you're saying. If you're doing something with a passion, and you're obviously doing something that you're very passionate about, and I totally applaud you for that, because many people get through life having never done anything that they were passionate about. And so for that, I'm like, that's fantastic. But I think we always need to be able to say, the way I view life is almost like whatever your God is or nature is or gods are, that somebody gave you a scrapbook and said, here's your scrapbook, Jenny, and go away in life and fill it. And at the end of the day, when your time is there, it would be interesting to see what's in there, right? And so for me as a TCK, a lot of the travel and things like that is a big part of who I am and who I want to be, because I can have more stuff to put into my scrapbook. There's more learning, there's more growth, there's more opportunity to find out how you think, how I think, try new food and understand different cultures, etc., etc. And I'm very scared that if I only do that, would I get to the end of my life and think that was a life that was really, really well spent? I'm so happy that I spent it that way. And so it's that finding a way to balance and say, all right, what else do I want to do? Because I've got to physically move this body. So if I'm doing 12 hours a day on a computer, I'm never physically moving my body. And humans have to do that. We have to do that. It's not an optional thing. If we want our health, we have to do that. So what am I giving up? And what am I getting by doing this, which should be fantastic and passionate about, et cetera, but am I okay with what I'm giving up and the potential outcomes of that?
That's really positive. That's a really positive approach to life, actually. I need to put that as the caption. Remind me on the minute of that, will you? I think it's around the late 22 minutes mark.
Yeah,
I need to put that as the question.
yeah.
Okay. All right then. So I actually need to backtrack a little bit because you earlier mentioned on TCK, yeah?
Yeah.
What is your experience with reverse culture shock? I mean, you've obviously gone through this your whole life. But after UK, you live in the Hong Kong, you live in Singapore, which is an Asian country from a European country. When you return home, do you still feel the exact same thing, or after a while you kind of just feel a little lost with what you've always been familiar with growing up?
So that's a really good question, because when we were doing the company that I worked for, we did cross-cultural training for foreigners moving from one country to another, but also for people repatriating, because many organizations forget that repatriation can be really, really hard. And the longer you've been away from whatever you call home, the harder it becomes. And so one of the big things that people tend to find, and myself included, is that if I'm in Asia and I meet other people who've traveled a lot and lived in different places and had many global experiences like yourself, then we have this curiosity about each other's experiences. So if you were to say to me, this happened when I was in China, I'd be going, tell me more, right? Leaning in, tell me more. I want to know more about what happened so we can discuss it. Quite often, depending on which country you're coming to, when you go back, reverse culture shock can mean that people where you came from, their experience hasn't changed since you left. And so the TV programs that they're watching, the news that they're watching, the things that they're doing every day. And so you have to be really careful to become what I call a when we, right? So and a when we is somebody who says, oh, when we were in Bali, this happened. When I went to work in Japan, this happened, because for the people you're going back to, they can't relate to it. So it sounds like your ego stepping in, and actually it's not. It is a passion for life. And so I loved your analogy right up front, Calvin, where you're talking about having to be a chameleon, is to actually sort of say, all right, this is who I am here. When I go back, I firstly know that there's going to be this period where I'm feeling a bit of dissonance in the body and the mind. But I do tend to find my accent changes back in the UK. I do tend to find that the conversation, what I converse about, changes versus if I'm in Singapore. And so to be able to kind of move with the flow, and like the chameleon, by the way, I used to have a chameleon in Uganda as a pet. So to be able to change colors and kind of flow and fit in is a really key skill that people need to be able to learn, because otherwise it just means that reverse culture shock can be as hard as going to a totally new culture.
I gotta ask now, though, what happened to the chameleon?
There is a story about my chameleon, and my elder brother has got something to, he has to take responsibility. So my parents are Indian. I was born in East Africa. I was born in Uganda. My parents were living in Tanzania before that. And so we didn't really have pets like cats and dogs, because apparently I was allergic to them. So I did have a chameleon, and I used to take my chameleon in a little basket to school every day. And I used to bring it out and put it in the trees and all of this sort of stuff. And my elder brother one day, as a joke, took my chameleon and released it. And tears.
No.
So my chameleon was called Granny. And Granny disappeared because Granny, of course, melded into the tree, so I couldn't see
Oh,
her. So there were lots and lots of tears around that. Yeah.
huh. Kind of symbolic of a life of a TCK, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's true. That's true. Yeah. Got to move on. Yeah.
Oh, poor Granny. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So let's put to the another tone, shall we? Okay. Uh, one of the, as I mentioned in the earliest, even before we actually went live, there's a reason why I actually in the past I actually don't put any filters to my guests. If you want to curse, by all means, you need to curse. Sometimes because I want people to be the most authentic self.
Yep.
However, recently I do have guests who have kids who are really, really young, who are just toddlers, actually. So I actually found out later on that one of them actually, the kid was watching when we are actually live. So I was like, oh goodness, thank God we didn't put any vulgarities or anything. So it is something that it actually, in a sense, kind of a trigger in a light bulb to me, is because I created this so that the younger generations of TCKs after mine, okay, I'm not super old, but the thing is that there will be the younger generations of TCKs who will start asking questions to their parents. Is that who, mom, dad, who am I, what am I actually? And I want them to actually have this platform so that they can tune in, they can hear stories of people who are just like them. So in a sense, as I said, this is for their form of representation and advocacy. So I actually have to ask this with you: is how is your own relationship with your cross-cultural kids, though? Because as you told me, your younger daughter is actually from Indonesia. She's
She
adopted,
is.
and of course, you regard her as your own daughter, actually,
She
because of
is.
course,
She is. Yeah. Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually want to ask, what is your relationship with them? And this is something that I ask parents who are TCKs themselves, is because unlike in the West, whereby freedom is given on free reign, in Asia, it's not based on how capable you are in making decisions because of that freedom, but how obedient you are to your parents. So, how has your approach been to it, to parenting?
Yeah, I think it's been a mixture of everything because I guess most people who meet me tend to think of me as being, excuse me, very westernized because of the accent, etc., etc. But my parents are Indian; both of them are Indian, and their value system is still very Asian, is still very Indian. So when I go back to the UK, I still listen to my parents, even at the age of 60. And I have this belief in filial piety, or filial duty. And I think most Westerners, if you say filial duty, they have no idea what that actually means because it doesn't really translate in any way. In having raised kids here in Singapore, the one thing that I really wanted to do was I wanted them to have a very multicultural experience. And that's why Singapore has been an amazing home, because it is very diverse and it is very multicultural. So a decision that was taken very early on was that I didn't want them to go to the British school. And at that time, I didn't know how long I was going to be in Singapore for. But I just wanted them to have access, and there's nothing wrong with the British school. It's a fantastic school here. But I just didn't want them to only have access to other Brits. And so the school that they went to was very, very multicultural, lots of Asians, lots of Europeans, lots of Americans, very multicultural, and really focused on diversity and respect for different cultures. So I'm very happy to have taken that decision because I think it's an important one that's kind of really framed who they are. They know my background. And so my own background is one where, as I said, my parents were Indian, moved to East Africa. In 1972, Idi Amin decided to kick out all the Ugandan Asians. And so within a matter of a couple of months, we literally took a small suitcase each and we left as refugees. We went to the UK and lived in a refugee camp for a while. And So pretty early on, I understood the concept of not fitting in. And so there I was being told I was not fitting in because of my color, because of my religion, because of all of these things, right? And then I moved to the UK, and we were given this home that my parents still live in Faversham in Kent. And some people were amazing and supportive. So the day we moved into this house, which is the same house, there was food in the oven, but there were, on the other side, we were the only Asians in the town. And so trying to go to a school where nobody had ever seen anybody with my skin color, then there's a lot of ignorance that goes with that. And so, yeah, we had racist comments, fights with my eldest brother, particularly because he had to face that, myself also. And so you start to learn that you have to be able to understand different cultures. And that became, I think, very embedded in me very early on. So for my daughters, because I have two daughters, is this focus that is both Asian and Western. So when we look at culture, we talk about cultural differences. For example, are you very individually orientated? So it's all about yourself and what you do, et cetera, et cetera. Or are you more group orientated like Asian cultures can be? And I guess they've been raised to be more individually orientated, but they also know that I have a big part of me that is still very group orientated. And so I have definitely taught them to speak up. I've tried my best. I don't know, that you'll have to ask them whether I succeeded or not, in focusing not just on what they know, but on how they think. Because I think that is a bigger skill that we need to teach our kids, is not just assimilating information and regurgitating it, but in actually having a mindset curiosity and an openness to want to know why is that, and tell me more, and I'll explore that for myself. So they've always had a voice, and sometimes I wish as an Indian mother the voice was quieter and more in keeping with my views. But then that's what I encouraged in them. I've tried to really encourage them to say, okay, you can take decisions for yourself, obviously, but you have to be willing to also accept the outcomes of those decisions. You can't do well, I took this decision to do X, Y, and Z, but when the outcome is not the way I thought, now what do I do? Somebody else needs to bail me out. So I think that they've got a mixture of both of these things. They recognize that family is very, very important to me and to the rest of us. They stay in touch with their grandparents. We have Zoom calls together. They know food time is important in an Asian way. Sitting at a table is really important. They understand, I don't think we're very authoritarian necessarily, and I think you can certainly see that more in some Asian cultures where you talk about tiger moms and things like that. I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of a tiger mom, but kind of more of a pussycat, really, wearing a tiger's face. I don't know. So mixture of that in terms of authority versus appealing to, I want you to come to a decision in yourself. So it's sometimes hard, to be honest, because I still feel like a big part of me has very strong Asian values. But there's another part of me that, because of my own journey in life, is also quite westernized, because I was educated in the UK. And so what I've tried to do is to take what I hope is the best of everything, put it into my kit bag as to how I show up in life, and then offer that to my daughters. And at the end of the day, they've got to take decisions for themselves. And like I say, they have to take responsibility for themselves as well. So yeah, they get everything. We holiday together, even though they're 25 and 22, we still holiday together. They know meal times and cooking together, and food and traditional food from my parents' cultures are all really important. They know that they need to show respect to elders, especially my parents. So they've learned all of those pieces that are very Asian. But I've also encouraged them sometimes, even though I found it hard, to say, go and find your own way, and you have to make your own mistakes. And sometimes I had to zip my tongue because they'll say to me, okay, this is our decision to take now, Mum. So it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both.
First off, let me applaud you because I know how difficult it could be growing up with a different skin. And especially in the United Kingdom, I've actually had one of my past guests who actually just sent a like here on the announcement page of your e-poster, Miss Lara. Hi, I hope you're well. So Lara actually told me that like in the UK, the British, they don't want to learn other language is because hey, English is supposed to be the global language. You're supposed to learn our language. So allow me to applaud you on that. Growing up there, it's definitely not easy. And regarding your style of parenting, it's actually something that my mom shared in a sense. My mother is not a TCK. She's not even a cross cultural kid. However, she has that same approach in that you have to learn to make your own mistakes. And if you still don't learn about it after a while, then you come back to me. I'll explain to you, but you need to learn on it first. So thank you. So I applaud you on that. Well done.
Thank you, and I applaud your mom as well.
Shout out to my mom.
Yeah, Calvin's mom. Well done.
Okay. All right. Okay, though. So pertaining to earlier on cross cultural, yeah. On a more negative note, recently in Singapore, there is an incredibly embarrassing event that happened whereby a lecturer called out a biracial couple for whatever reason. I don't get it. It's in the middle of the road for some reason. I don't have the full context to it. I wasn't there. I only can get the idea of it when I'm reading the news. I actually want to ask your experience on this because, as you have stated, in fact, and as you have admitted, you are of Indian heritage. You grew up in the Western, however. However, when people see you, they will assume you're a Caucasian because of the way you speak or where you are from, just because of your passport country. How has others perceive you, though, externally, even though it's actually too far from the truth? And I will pass this question to you first. I will carry on the second one after you've answered it.
Sure. Yeah, that scenario with the lecturer was pretty shocking, and unfortunately, when it gets captured on video, it's hard to deny it, especially when the person says, "Yes, I am a racist." So it is a very challenging time for me in Singapore. I don't feel personally. Sorry, let me just switch this off. I personally don't actually see that that I've faced racism. Because, and maybe it is because people see me as the Westerner versus Indian, but I have seen that when people found out that I was Indian, sometimes that has changed. So to give you, it's a kind of funny but not really funny scenario. When I moved into my last property that I was renting, one of the things I wanted to do was to get to know my neighbors a bit better. I like having good relationships with my neighbors. So I knocked on the door next to me, and I was invited in by this lovely Singaporean woman. And then we were chatting, and she ended up talking a lot about her maid. And then she was saying, "Oh, I've always had maid issues, etc., etc." And so I said, "Oh, okay." And so I was just being polite, said, "Right." And she said, "Yeah. The last one," she said, was sleeping with somebody." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." She said, "Yeah, she was sleeping with Indian, like a migrant worker." So I just said, "Oh, how did you find out about it?" And she said, "Well, I came into the house," she said, "and I started going up the stairs, and I could smell Indian." So I was a little bit surprised, and I said, "Oh, tell me more. What does that mean? You could smell Indian?" And she looked at me because she obviously didn't think I was Indian, and she said, "You know that smell? All Indian people have it. It's not a good smell." And so I just thought, okay. So I just looked at her and I said, "Huh, interesting." And I went, "I'll have to go and check on that smell." And she looked at me and she went, "Yeah, you Indian? Ah? So I said, yeah, I'm an Indian. And she said, ayo, but I don't mean your type of Indian wa. I mean like Indian one. Ah.
Oh my
I
God.
just, I am an Indian one. So, but I chose not
Oh
to take
God.
offense, but I wanted to say to her. And so we got into a conversation about why do you feel that way? What is your thoughts about it? So I think sometimes people are a bit surprised and say, yeah, but you don't look like an Indian or you don't speak like an Indian. And I think they think that they're doing me a favor by shrouding it in those ways, right? Which is, you're not an Indian, you're something beyond that. So for me, racism it's a weird thing because sometimes it is totally unconscious and we have biases based on, the company that I was working for, but we used to help people get homes and rent homes. And it was surprising to me that you could actually say, when you're trying to rent out your home here, that no Indians or no X or
Yeah.
no Y, because certainly in most other countries, you wouldn't be able to state that so overtly. But I think cultural discrimination also comes because it's not just national culture. We tend to talk about national culture, but it can also be related to gender. It can be related to language, or it can be related to your sexual preference. So there's many layers. It can be related to generational culture, right? And so I find it interesting now that I've turned 60, because I joined the Speakers Institute to become a public speaker. And there was a Singaporean lady with me in the queue, and she turned around and she was talking about it, and somehow my age came up, and I said, yeah, I'm going to be turning 60. And she turned around and she said, then why you want to do something like this, huh? So I said, something like what? She went, 60 years old already. 60 years old already. Why you want to do something and become a speaker? And I said, I didn't know that I had a use-by date. I haven't seen that imprinted on me. So for me, to the last day that I can, I want to continue to grow and develop, et cetera, But there was this unconscious belief in her that your life and what you can give is within this period of time, right? So that perception of you as an older woman, all of these things come into play and are very layered. So I think in Singapore, it's kind of interesting at this moment in time, because obviously the essence of Singapore is built on being multicultural, multiracial. And that's been the appeal to global organizations, bringing people in.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, what happens when people feel under stress, and you're seeing this in the US as well with anti-American Asian sentiment, et cetera, is when people are struggling, and when we perceive that resources are limited, and that resource could be money, it could be land, it could be food, it could be, in this case with this guy, women, whatever it is, we tend to go into battle mode, which is, I'm going to look after my own. And my own is, this group of people have greater rights than other groups of people. And I found it interesting because I noted that in 2016, there was actually a study done by CNA and IPS that found 2/3 of respondents in Singapore felt that discussions of race could lead to tension. So they did not want any discussions around that. They felt like it's a personal thing. You should just push it down under the rug, because there was a belief that if you open the doors, where would that lead? Would you end up going back to 1964 and the racial tensions, et cetera, et cetera? So especially with older generations, it was like, we don't want to talk about it because that could cause issues. So I think it's going to be very interesting times for Singapore. Singapore's been very kind to me personally as a foreigner here, and I never ever take that for granted. But I don't believe that's the case for everybody, for sure. And we've also seen that, with the recent scenario with the helper who was abused to the point that she passed away and had lost half her body weight, right? So I think we have to do a lot of soul searching here and say, what are we standing up for as human beings? What are my beliefs and values and things like this? Where do they even come from? Why would I believe that saying this or behaving in this world is okay, and really going introspective and say, who told me that this was okay, and why do I believe it, and having the discussion.
I think it all comes down to the theory is that is this something that we what do we have to believe in as human? Is this something that would hurt other human being, or it's just for our own personal benefit? First off, actually, compliments to your Singaporean accent. It's really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. Uh, I I have in my social media pages, I have showed my openly support the Asian community since, of course, I am one. So growing up in Singapore, I always felt that one of my main outlet back then was to watch Western media in order for me to feel relatable. Is because in Singapore it's not easy for me to do that. Growing up in Indonesia, my main style of English is the American movies from the 80s. So I tend to talk with what people like to presume an accent, which they think um, it's just pretentious, which I'm not trying to be. That's the way I know how to speak. So you tell me to all of a sudden you can't speak like that. I was like, what? Why? This is how I speak. Uh, when though as I grow older, the Western media that became my safe haven in a sense, I kind of realized nobody looked like me, and when saw people who look like me, it's depicted in such a way that is humiliating, that is degrading, and that is embarrassing. So this is actually going to be, in a sense, my final questions for you, Jenny, is because if let's say now, because media is an extremely powerful tool, it's available in any kind of platform, whether it's on television or even the fact that we are using it now to speak. Yeah. If let's say racial diversity, racial unity, in a sense, is portrayed more favorably in this media outlet, how do you think, though, it will help to bond the current generation with the next generation, or how do you think it will impact the next generation? It's because we always learn from what we see, what we hear, and what others speak. And when we were younger, we take that and we grew up with it.
Yeah.
And there will be those of us who are fortunate enough to realize that, oh, it doesn't have to be done that way. However, times has been changing. However, is it done in the right way, or is it done still in a way that is more commercialized?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of commercialization that still continues. And I think you're right. We have to be able to change the narrative around the whole thing if we want to see differences. And you're absolutely right. It's hard to be what you cannot see, right? So if you don't see somebody else that looks like you making it on the stage or in the media or in movies, and as you say, you're depicted in a way that's humiliating, it's hard to imagine that there could ever be a different option. And so then we start to, as Asians, we start to play small because we feel that's our space, because that's all you've ever been told is this is who you are. And so I think there is a requirement to use technology for a huge amount of education. And I think that education has to start right at the get-go at school. And kids need to learn about each other's cultures and why people are different and how they're portrayed and why they believe or dress the way they do and the values behind it, as opposed to listening to a rhetoric that just says our Western ideal, the way that we view X, Y, and Z, whether it's women or whatever, is the right way. Is if we can do it right from with youth, I think it should be part of school curriculums. I think it should be part of university. I think every organization needs to start looking at it, because a lot of places still just want to tick in the box, right? They want diversity quotas, but what does that actually mean? It's just like, okay, I need to just show that I made the grade, as opposed to really changing the discussion about it. And it is interesting because it then comes to play all the way into your professional life. And, that is what we did at Cartus, and recognizing, getting people to change how they thought about race. So media has an opportunity if we start to show more positivity around it, because I think, some people say, well, if I take the scenario in the US, a lot of people will talk about the previous president and his role in that, right? And so some people say, well, that was always there, so it's not his fault. And it may have always been there, but the problem is when you have somebody in power who comes in to ignite what was a small flame, you then get that's what people are seeing, and they're hearing the words, and it's like, oh, it's okay, you've legitimized my behavior for me now. And if you can say those things and you can do those things, I darn well, why can't I? Because I start to aspire to being like this, and it tends to make sense. And so I do think that media has a big part to play in having, the balanced discussions about what's going on, showing the positivity as well, the positive stories, not just the negative stories. But it also has to be a forum for change. It has to be a forum for change, because otherwise all we hear is the nice stories, but nothing is actually moving in terms of the dial to move us to a place where we are more integrated and we're having those discussions. And it makes me sad that people tend to think of conversations like this sometimes as soft skills, right? Intercultural communication is a soft skill. It's not a hard skill. It's not like management training or leadership training, but actually it's one of the skills that if you acquire it, can give you the most profound transformational change within your group, within a broader sense, within your organization. And so I don't like calling it a soft skill. I think it's an absolute prerequisite for us living in this global world that we're living in at this moment, which is getting, sadly, in some places, less and less tolerant of each other.
Not only must it be a hard skill, opposite of soft skill, it is the optimal way to be a human being.
Absolutely. And that's the hard part about culture, is because cultural values are learned, Calvin, right? And so as parents, we teach our kids what to believe and what behaviors are okay and not okay. And that's based on who we believe we can trust and who we can't trust. So in other words, if somebody looks like me, behaves like me, thinks like me, I can bring them in and I can trust that individual. That person is an outsider. So we tend to think in terms of insider and outsider. And so the outsiders are not to be trusted. We have to keep them at arm's length. They stand for something that we don't. But we have to learn curiosity. We have to teach our kids to ask the questions, which is, yeah, you are different to me. Let's sit down. Tell me more about your religion. Tell me more about why you do the things, and be open to you hearing more about why I believe. And maybe then, you start to see a little bit of rubbing off on each other, right? Versus these tight cliques that seem to be getting tighter. And unfortunately, I think that sort of animosity and aggression becomes more ingrained when you go through a hard time. And with the pandemic, and when you look at the economic result of that, where people are really struggling because they don't have jobs, et cetera, then people are always looking to, who can I blame? And then it's like, okay, somebody else who doesn't look like me, doesn't think like me, they're the ones to blame, because I need to be able to point in a certain direction. And so that's where I think we have big work to do in front of us, but I hope that your community and the incredible work you do, for which I totally applaud you, and I'm sure, will continue to grow. I just want to say you're part of that movement that says we need to be open-minded, and that starts with self. It starts with self and curiosity.